Felix thinks I'm broke, stupid, and desperate, the divorced dad who can't even afford his daughter's wedding gift. He scheduled the moving truck for 8 in the morning tomorrow, has keys to what he thinks is their storage unit, and he's been liquidating my daughter's possessions for cash all week. What Felix doesn't know, I own the moving company. Every box, every truck route, every access code, it all runs through my dispatch system. He just hired me to rob himself. The call came 3 days before everything unraveled. Tuesday afternoon, late September heat still pressing through the walls of my dispatch office like something alive and patient. I was running diagnostics on the fleet tracking system, routine maintenance, the kind of work that keeps trucks moving and clients from calling at midnight wondering where their furniture ended up. The air conditioner wheezed through dust-caked vents. My coffee had gone cold in a mug Sarah gave me 8 years ago, back when she still thought her old man's job was interesting instead of embarrassing. Felix didn't knock. He pushed through the door like he owned the oxygen in the room, bringing that cologne smell with him, something botanical and expensive that always made my sinuses tighten. He wore a shirt that probably cost more than my monthly insurance premium, fabric so crisp it looked hostile to human skin. "Daryl, we've got a situation." Not hello. Not, got a minute. Just my first name, flat and transactional, like I was a vendor he'd called about a service interruption. "Sarah and I are relocating. Phoenix. New opportunity. We need to move our household into temporary storage while we house hunt." I kept my hands on the keyboard, watching route algorithms calculate paths across 3 monitors. 47 trucks on the road right now, each one a moving data point I could track down to which highway exit they'd just passed. Logistics is about eliminating surprise. You see the problems before they become fires. When's the move? Day after tomorrow. Thursday morning, 8 sharp. He slid a paper across my desk, premium movers contract, the expensive outfit that advertises on highway billboards. Already booked the crew. $2,400 quote for full service pack and load. I just need you to recommend a decent storage facility. Something secure but not bleeding us dry on monthly fees. I picked up the contract. Standard residential agreement, boilerplate liability language, estimated weight 4,800 pounds. The kind of document people sign because the sales guy smiled right and made it sound simple. You're moving 4,800 pounds to Phoenix. Temporarily into storage. Phoenix real estate's a nightmare right now. We'll be in corporate housing for a few months, maybe 6. Just need somewhere climate-controlled to park everything until we buy. Storage Max on Industrial Boulevard. They run a clean operation. Reasonable rates, 24-hour access, good security. Felix's face did something, a micro-expression of satisfaction, like I'd just confirmed something he'd already decided. Perfect. I'll set it up today. He turned to leave, then stopped in the doorway, his body language shifting into something rehearsed. One more thing. Sarah's grandmother's jewelry, the stuff her dad left her in the estate. Could you hang on to it for us? Just until we're settled. I don't love the idea of it sitting in a storage unit with furniture and boxes. The request landed wrong. Sarah's grandmother, Eleanor, had left her a platinum engagement ring from the 40s, pearl earrings that came in a Cartier box with tissue paper gone yellow at the edges, and a lady's watch with a leather band that smelled like old perfume. The insurance appraisal from the estate lawyer listed total value at $47,000. Not the kind of items you hand off casually. Why not a bank safety deposit box? Banks charge fees. You've got that safe in your garage, right? The big one. Just for a few months while we get sorted. I looked at Felix. 34 years old, wearing a sweater that probably had an Italian name I couldn't pronounce, selling medical software to hospital administrators for a base salary around $140. The kind of man who thinks a gun safe in someone's garage is interchangeable with a vault because both have locks. I'll need documentation. Itemized list, estimated values, dated transfer of custody with both signatures. His expression flickered, annoyance passing behind his eyes like a shadow. Jesus, Daryl. We're family. You don't need a legal document to hold onto Sarah's jewelry. I run a bonded moving and storage company. Everything I touch gets documented. Liability protection. He signed the custody form like a man humoring someone's neurotic quirk, his pen strokes quick and dismissive. When his BMW rolled out of my parking lot 11 minutes later, I activated the security camera feed and saved the timestamp. 2:37 in the afternoon, September 24th. The moment I started counting. I pulled up my dispatch software, proprietary system I'd built with a programmer named Rodriguez back when I still thought technology could solve human problems, and ran a search query. Premium movers showed 6 active jobs scheduled for Thursday. Impossible logistics. You can't run 6 residential moves in an 8-hour window unless you're subcontracting work to smaller operators, which meant Premium was overbooked and farming out jobs to people like me. I called Rick Paulson, their operations manager. We'd worked adjacent routes for 15 years, the kind of professional relationship built on knowing each other's truck maintenance schedules and which loading docks had the broken pavement that wrecked your suspension. Rick. You overbooked Thursday. A pause on his end, the sound of papers shuffling and someone yelling about a missing dolly in the background. Christ, Daryl, you monitoring my dispatch board now? I monitor logistics patterns. You've got 6 moves scheduled in an 8-hour window. That's 4 hours per job if everything goes perfect, which it never does. You're subbing out at least 2. Yeah, I'm farming 2 jobs to independents. You want 1. Which 2? A Walsh Felix residence on Oakmont Drive and a Zimmerman estate cleanout in Cornelius. My pulse didn't change. 47 years of maintaining electrical systems in industrial facilities taught me that panic is just wasted voltage. You identify the problem, isolate the circuit, and execute the repair protocol. Emotion is static in the system. I'll take Walsh Felix. Send the manifest. The manifest arrived an hour later via encrypted file transfer. Felix Walsh, Sarah James Walsh, 447 Oakmont Drive. Estimated inventory read like a catalog of aspirational living, sectional sofa, entertainment center, bedroom suite, dining furniture, artwork, electronics, personal effects. Destination, Storage Max Unit 127, Industrial Boulevard. I sat in my garage after dark, the space where I'd rebuilt transmission systems and taught myself CAD programming during the 2 years after Ruth died when sleep felt optional and the house was too quiet. Overhead LED fixtures cast everything in that bluish clarity that makes shadows look digital. On my workbench, the property custody form Felix had signed, a legal pad with graph paper, my laptop connected to 3 monitors that hummed like patient animals. Storage Max's facility management system opened with my admin credentials. I'd installed their electronic lock system back in 2019 when the owner needed to modernize and didn't want to hire one of the big security contractors who'd charge triple and take 6 months. Every magnetic lock in that facility, commercial-grade hardware with RFID access codes, logged to a server sitting in my office closet. I maintained it under a $2,400 annual service contract that gave me root access to every timestamp, every entry code, every door that opened or stayed closed. Unit 127 showed recent activation. Primary access code 4729, registered to Felix Walsh, billing cycle monthly at $240. Secondary authorized users, none listed. I opened a second screen and pulled up the security camera network. Covert installation, 4 cameras covering main corridors and loading zones. Not for surveillance, for diagnostics. When clients claimed mysterious disappearances of stored property, video evidence ended disputes faster than any argument. Unit 127 sat in clear view of camera 3, wide-angle lens that captured everything from the corridor to the loading bay. The third monitor showed my company financials. James Moving and Storage, established 2003, annual gross around $340, net margin hovering at 18%. Small operation, 2 full-time drivers, 1 part-time admin who handled invoicing, 4 trucks ranging from a 16-foot box van to a 26-foot Freightliner with a hydraulic lift gate. I didn't compete with Premium on volume. I competed on precision. On knowing where every item was, every minute of every day, and being able to prove it with timestamps and photographs. I had allowed Felix to treat me like an obsolete component, the broke divorced dad who couldn't keep his wife and couldn't afford to look successful at family gatherings, because I'd been testing a hypothesis. Not whether Sarah had married an asshole. That was obvious within 6 months of meeting him. The question was whether she'd married a predator or just someone who'd grow out of being casually cruel. The jewelry custody request had answered that. Men who respect boundaries don't demand access to $47,000 in assets while dismissing documentation as paranoid theater. The internal timer had started. Now I just needed to let Felix dig until he hit bedrock, then show him what was underneath. Thursday morning arrived with fog thick enough to taste, the kind that turns streetlights into smudged halos and makes distances hard to judge. I was at 447 Oakmont Drive by 7:45, my transit van idling in the driveway while Felix stood in the doorway looking at me like I was a glitch in his carefully scheduled morning. His hair was still wet from the shower. He wore the kind of athletic leisure clothes that cost $300 to look like you weren't trying. "Daryl. What are you doing here? Where's premium? Subcontracted the job to me. They overbooked." I handed him a clipboard with a standard bill of lading attached, the carbon paper underneath already starting to smudge my thumb. "I need you to verify inventory as we load. Sign off on condition and quantity." His jaw worked for a moment, calculations running behind his eyes. Probably weighing the cost of rescheduling against the inconvenience of having his father-in-law handle his relocation. "You're serious? You're doing our move. Unless you want to pay premium's cancellation fee. That's $480 according to Section 7.3 of your contract. 20% of total job cost for same-day cancellation." He took the clipboard. Took it the way you take something that smells bad but you can't refuse. "Fine. Let's just get this done." Sarah's car wasn't in the driveway. She'd left for work at 6:30 according to the location data I could see on the family tracking app she'd insisted I join 2 years ago for safety purposes. Felix had the house to himself, which meant no witnesses to how he talked to me, no filter on the contempt that usually stayed just below the surface at family gatherings. I worked the way I'd worked 10,000 jobs over 23 years. Methodical. Each item photographed with my phone camera before it left the room, front angle, side angle, any existing damage circled in red marker on the inventory sheet. Felix watched for maybe 20 minutes, then got bored and started scrolling through his phone, his thumb moving in that endless downward swipe that means someone's not really looking at anything, just occupying time. "Nice furniture," I said, wrapping a leather sofa in quilted moving blankets that smelled like diesel and cardboard. "This whole load's probably worth 70,000-80,000. Felix glanced up. "Closer to 60. Most of it's Sarah's family stuff. Hand-me-downs. These dining chairs are $800 each. Herman Miller. I moved a set like this last year for a lawyer in Davidson." He had the receipt. Something shifted in Felix's posture. A stiffness creeping into his shoulders. "You memorize furniture brands now?" "I memorize asset values. Part of risk assessment. The more valuable the load, the more careful I have to be with insurance documentation." I lifted a box sound system, checked the weight, noted it on the manifest. "You insured this load for replacement value. Premium's insurance covers it. At 60 cents per pound. This system weighs maybe 12 pounds. Your coverage cap's at $720. Replacement cost is $1,100. Jesus Christ, Daryl. I didn't ask for an insurance audit." I nodded and kept loading. Kept photographing. Kept documenting every single item that left that house and went into my truck. Felix signed the delivery confirmation at Storage Max at 11:47, his signature hasty and irritated, like I'd somehow inconvenienced him by doing exactly what he'd hired me to do. He drove away in his BMW without saying thank you or goodbye or anything that might acknowledge I'd just saved him $480 in cancellation fees. I sat in my van for 6 minutes after he left, watching the entrance to Unit 127 on my phone screen. The camera feed showed the empty corridor, the closed gate, the locked access panel waiting for someone to punch in the code. At 11:58, Felix returned. Alone. He entered the unit using code 4729, stayed inside for 8 minutes, then left. Just verifying the load. Making sure everything was where he expected it to be. Making sure his plan was intact. I drove to my workshop and locked the door behind me. The space smelled like old motor oil and sawdust and the particular mustiness of concrete that never fully dries. I made coffee in the dented percolator Ruth bought at a yard sale in 2009, back when we still thought we had decades left to accumulate kitchen equipment we'd never use. The coffee tasted burned and perfect. I opened my laptop and pulled up the storage Mac system logs. Unit 127 showed one access event, Felix Walsh, code 4729, 1158 to 1206. 8 minutes inside. Then I did what Felix would never think to do because he'd never bothered to ask what I actually did for a living beyond moving stuff. I accessed the administrative backend of the facility security system. The system I'd designed. The system I'd installed. The system that gave me root access to every function, every override, every piece of data that moved through those servers. I could see every unit in the facility. Every access code. Every entry timestamp going back 47 months to when the system went live. I could generate reports, modify access permissions, lock or unlock any unit remotely, and most importantly, I could set alerts for specific trigger events. I created a custom alert, notify if Unit 127 accessed between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. Notify if Unit 127 accessed more than twice in any 24-hour period. Notify if access duration exceeds 30 minutes. Then I pulled up the security camera network and set the recording parameters to maximum resolution for camera 3. Every pixel saved. Every frame logged. Every movement timestamped down to the 100th of a second. Felix thought he'd hired a moving company. What he'd actually done was put his entire theft operation under surveillance by the one person who had complete visibility into every step of his plan. I sat back in my chair, the old wood creaking under my weight, and thought about the question I'd been asking myself for 2 years. Why had I allowed Felix to treat me like I was obsolete? Why had I smiled through the condescension, the casual cruelty, the way he talked to Sarah about me like I was a burden she'd inherited along with her mother's medical bills? The answer wasn't complicated. I'd been waiting to see if Sarah would defend me. Waiting to see if my daughter had enough of Ruth in her to recognize when someone was being cruel for sport. Waiting to see if she'd inherited the part of her mother that couldn't tolerate watching someone get diminished in front of witnesses. She hadn't. She'd laughed at Felix's jokes about my vintage truck. She'd apologized to her friends for my blue-collar conversation topics. She'd stopped inviting me to gatherings where Felix's colleagues would be present because I wouldn't fit in with that crowd. That hurt worse than Felix's contempt. Felix was a stranger. Sarah was my daughter. But I'd kept waiting. Kept hoping. Kept playing the role of the harmless old man who didn't notice when he was being disrespected. The jewelry request had ended that. Not because of the value. Because of what it revealed about Felix's assessment of me. He thought I was too stupid to recognize a setup. Too trusting to ask questions. Too desperate for family connection to protect myself. He'd mistaken patience for weakness. Calculation for incompetence. Professional restraint for ignorance. The timer had been running for 2 years. Now it was about to reach 0. I pulled up the property custody form Felix had signed. Scanned it into my system. Emailed a copy to my lawyer with a note, "Hold this. May need it for estate documentation." Then I set my phone on the workbench and waited for Felix to make his next move. In logistics, timing is everything. You don't rush the delivery. You don't force the route. You set up the optimal path and then you wait for the cargo to move itself into position. Felix would come back to that storage unit. He'd come back after dark when he thought no one was watching. He'd remove items he thought no one would miss. He'd sell them to buyers who didn't ask questions. And every single move he made would be documented by the system he didn't know I controlled. The coffee had gone cold again. I drank it anyway. Cold coffee never hurt anyone. Underestimating people does. The alert came at 2:37 in the morning. My phone vibrated on the nightstand, the screen casting blue light across the ceiling of a bedroom that still felt too empty 8 years after Ruth died. The notification was simple: Unit 127 accessed, code 4729, OFF hours entry. I was already awake. Had been for an hour, lying in the dark listening to the house settle, the particular creaks and sighs of a structure built in 1973 that had weathered 4 decades of thermal expansion and contraction. Some nights sleep feels optional. Some nights your body understands that waiting is the only useful activity. I opened the camera feed on my phone. Camera 3 showed Felix entering Unit 127 with a rolling dolly, aluminum frame, rubber wheels, the kind you rent from hardware stores for $19 a day. He wore dark clothes. Not theatrical black like a movie burglar, just navy blue sweatshirt and jeans that wouldn't stand out if someone saw him. Smart. Amateur smart, which is different from professional smart, but still showed he'd thought about visibility. I watched him work. He moved efficiently, selecting items with clear predetermined intent. The Herman Miller chairs first, compact, high value, easy to transport. Then the boxed Bose sound system. Then a framed print Sarah had inherited from her father, abstract expressionism in blacks and reds, the kind of art that looks like nothing until you learn it's worth $12,000 because of who signed it in the corner. Felix made 3 trips total. Load the dolly, wheel it to the corridor, disappear from camera view toward the loading zone, return with the empty dolly. 41 minutes inside the unit. At 3:43 he drove away in a white rental van, budget logo on the side, the kind of vehicle that's invisible in traffic because 20,000 of them move through any city on any given day. I didn't follow him. Didn't need to. I'd installed a tracking beacon under the rear bumper while he was loading, magnetic mount GPS tracker, the kind repo men use, broadcasts location every 30 seconds to a server that logs coordinates and timestamps. The van drove to a 24-hour Walmart parking lot on Route 77. Stopped. Sat idle for 29 minutes. At Fort Weld a silver pickup truck arrived. Ford F-Series, older model, the bed already holding furniture and what looked like rolled carpets. A man got out. Heavy-set, 50s, wearing work clothes that had the particular grubbiness of someone who makes a living buying and selling things that fall off trucks or out of divorces or from estate sales where no one's paying attention. Felix and the men talked for 6 minutes. Then money changed hands. Not a check. Not a digital transfer. Cash. The men counted it twice, thick stack of bills that caught streetlight as he thumbed through them. Then he loaded items from Felix's van into his truck bed. The Herman Miller chairs. The sound system. The framed print wrapped in a moving blanket. At 4:39 the pickup drove away. Felix returned the budget van to the rental location, unmanned drop-off box, key slot that doesn't ask questions, and drove home in his BMW. I had 18 screenshots. 12 video segments. Complete GPS tracking data showing both vehicles' movements. Metadata timestamps for every file. Chain of custody documentation that would satisfy any court or insurance investigator. I made coffee and watched the sun come up through my kitchen window. The light hit the room in stages, gray to amber to that hard white clarity that makes everything look exactly like what it is. No romance in morning light. Just exposure. My phone rang at 8:47. Felix. His voice had that forced casualness of someone trying to sound relaxed while their pulse hammers in their ears. Hey Daryl, quick question. Could you swing by the storage unit sometime today? Sarah's paranoid about the lock code. Just want to make sure. Everything's secure. Sure. I can check this afternoon. Actually, also, we're thinking we might need to move everything to Phoenix sooner than planned. Sarah's new job wants her to start earlier. Could you help us load a U-Haul? Maybe Monday morning. What time? Early. 6 a.m. Beat the traffic. I agreed. Said it wasn't a problem. Said I'd clear my schedule. Played the role he expected, the accommodating old man, grateful for any excuse to feel useful, too oblivious to notice when he was being set up. After I hung up I sat at my kitchen table for 11 minutes, drinking coffee that had gone lukewarm, feeling the particular satisfaction that comes from watching someone walk deeper into a trap they built themselves. Felix had just locked in his timeline. Monday morning, 6 a.m., he'd arrive at Storage Max expecting to load a U-Haul with furniture and possessions. He'd probably bring the same buyer from the Walmart parking lot. They'd empty the unit, split the profits, and by the time Sarah realized her grandmother's jewelry was gone along with half their household goods, Felix would explain it as a moving company error or a storage facility theft. He'd file an insurance claim. Collect the payout. Pocket the cash from the sold items plus the insurance settlement. Double profit. The kind of scheme that works when you think the people around you are too stupid or too trusting to add up the numbers. I called Dennis Morrison, the owner of Morrison Secure Storage, my facility, 8 miles from StorageMax, the warehouse space I'd bought in 2007 when commercial real estate crashed and opportunity looked like a foreclosure sign. Dennis, I need you to prep Unit 14. Climate controlled. Full household load. I'll be transferring inventory Sunday night. Short notice, Daryl. It's a special situation. Family matter. He didn't ask questions. 20 years in the storage business teaches you that half your clients are running from something and the other half are hiding something, and the smart operator doesn't ask which category you fall into. I spent Saturday doing maintenance work that didn't need doing. Rotated tires on my van. Recalibrated the GPS tracking system. Organized tools that were already organized. The kind of busy work that keeps your hands occupied while your mind runs scenarios and contingency protocols. Ruth used to say I couldn't sit still when something important was brewing. Said I'd pace the house before job interviews or parent-teacher conferences, needing to move because stillness felt like wasted energy. She'd been right. Motion was how I processed. How I prepared. How I convinced my body that I was doing something productive while I waited for other people to finish digging their own graves. Sunday night I loaded my Freightliner with help from Rodriguez and his brother Miguel. We worked under sodium vapor lights that turned everything orange and flat, our shadows stretching across the asphalt like ink spills. By 11:30 we'd emptied Unit 127 completely. 43 items. Every piece photographed, inventoried, loaded with the same care I'd used to put them there 4 days earlier. The only thing I left behind was a manila envelope zip-tied to the interior gate. Inside, a complete printed inventory of all removed items, time-stamped photographs showing Felix accessing the unit at 2:37 a.m. Friday, still frames showing him loading the budget van, meeting the buyer in the Walmart parking lot, accepting cash payment. Below the photographs, a single document printed on legal paper with my company letterhead, Notice of Asset Seizure under North Carolina General Statute 14-168.1, Theft of Property Subject to Security Interest. All items removed from Unit 127 StorageMax Industrial Boulevard have been transferred to secure storage pending resolution of unauthorized removal and conversion of said assets. For claim verification, contact James Moving and Storage. I included my phone number, my email, my business license number. Everything Felix would need to understand that he hadn't been robbed. He'd been caught. We drove the Freightliner to Morrison's facility in a convoy, me, Rodriguez, Miguel following in his pickup truck in case we needed extra muscle for heavy furniture. The warehouse was dark except for the security lights over the loading bay. We unloaded in silence, the only sounds are breathing and the scrape of furniture on metal ramps and the particular hollow thud of boxes stacked in empty rooms. By 2 a.m. everything was secured in Unit 14. Climate controlled, electronically locked, monitored by cameras that fed to servers I controlled. Sarah's possessions were safer now than they'd been in her own house. By 6:05 Monday morning I was parked 3 rows away from Unit 127 at StorageMax, coffee thermos wedged between my seat and the center console, phone screen showing the camera feed. Felix arrived at 6:30 in a 20-foot U-Haul, the men from the Walmart parking lot riding passenger. They looked confident. Relaxed. 2 guys about to make easy money off someone else's trust. Felix punched in his access code. The gate unlocked. He pulled it open and stepped inside. I watched his body language change in real time. The confident posture collapsing into confusion. His head turning left, right, scanning the empty space like the furniture might be hiding in corners. He stood frozen for 17 seconds. Then he ripped the manila envelope off the gate. Read the contents. His face went through stages, confusion shading into comprehension shading into panic. He made a phone call. Probably to Sarah. Then another call. His hand gestures getting more agitated, more frantic. Then he called me. I let it ring 5 times before answering. Didn't want to seem too eager. Daryl James. Where the fuck is everything? His voice had lost all pretense of civility. Raw panic stripped down to animal fear. Move to secure storage. You stole our belongings. I transferred inventory under breach of contract provisions. You violated the storage agreement by removing items without authorization and selling them to third parties. That's conversion of secured assets. North Carolina General Statute 14-168.1. Class H felony carrying 18 to 25 months imprisonment. Silence on his end. The kind of silence that means someone's brain is trying to process information it doesn't want to accept. You're insane. I have video evidence of you accessing Unit 127 at 2:37 a.m. Friday. Removing 12 items. Meeting a buyer in a Walmart parking lot at 4:12 a.m. Accepting cash payment. I have GPS tracking data for both vehicles. I have timestamped photographs of every transaction. I also have documentation proving you transferred custody of Sarah's grandmother's jewelry to me on Tuesday, September 24th, which means you no longer have legal access to those assets or any community property derived from Sarah's family estate. More silence. Longer this time. I could hear his breathing on the other end of the line, quick and shallow like someone who'd just run upstairs. What do you want? Return every dollar you stole by Wednesday 5 p.m. Or I file a police report and send all evidence to Sarah and your employer's compliance department. Your company does federal healthcare contracts, correct? I imagine they have standards regarding employee criminal activity. Background check requirements. Morality clauses. How much do you think I took? My estimate based on asset values and your transaction with the buyer Friday morning, $43,000. You're welcome to provide receipts proving otherwise. He hung up. I sat in my van drinking coffee that had gone cold, watching Felix stand in the empty storage unit holding the envelope like it might transform into something that made sense. The buyer had already left, his pickup truck disappearing from the parking lot 30 seconds after Felix started yelling. Smart guy. Knew when a deal had gone bad. Knew when to cut losses and vanish. Felix stood there for another 8 minutes before finally closing the gate and walking back to the U-Haul. His shoulders had the particular slump of someone who'd just realized they weren't the smartest person in the room. Had never been the smartest person in the room. Had just been operating in a room full of people too polite to mention it. I finished my coffee and drove to my workshop. Had maintenance scheduled on 3 trucks this week. Oil changes. Brake inspections. The kind of routine work that keeps a fleet running and a business solvent and a life moving forward when everything else feels like waiting. Wednesday at 4:23 p.m. Felix appeared at my office. No appointment. No phone call. Just walked in holding a cashier's check like it was a grenade with the pin pulled. His face looked hollow. Gray. The particular exhaustion of someone who hadn't slept in 72 hours. This is everything. He set the check on my desk. Bank of America. $43,000. Payable to Sarah James Walsh. I photographed it with my phone. Front and back. Then I looked at Felix. Sarah know you're here? I told her I got a signing bonus. Early commission payout. You should tell her the truth. Why? You already ruined everything. I didn't steal from my own wife. That was your choice. Your plan. Your execution. I just documented it. Felix left my office with the posture of someone who thought he'd just bought his way out of consequences. I watched his BMW pull away through the window that overlooked my parking lot, the late afternoon sun catching the paint job and turning it into something that looked expensive and untouchable. He thought $43,000 was the price of my silence. Thought a cashier's check made this a closed transaction. He'd miscalculated again. The money wasn't the point. The money had never been the point. I deposited the check in Sarah's account Thursday morning at the bank branch where she'd been a customer since college, where the tellers knew her by name and asked about her mother's health before Ruth died. The account was joint, father and daughter, established when she was 19 and needed a cosigner for her first apartment lease. She'd never removed my access. Probably forgot I had it. The transaction posted instantly. $43,000 appearing in her balance like a gift from nowhere. I didn't tell her it was there. Didn't explain where it came from. Just let it sit in her account, waiting for her to notice and ask questions I was ready to answer. Friday evening my phone rang. Sarah. Her voice had that particular brightness that meant she was calling from somewhere public, performing the dutiful daughter role for whoever was in earshot. Dad, hi. Felix said you helped with the move last week. Thank you for that. Not a problem. How's Phoenix treating you? We're not in Phoenix yet. Job thing fell through. We're staying local for now, reworking some plans. Her voice did something subtle on that last part. A tightness creeping in around the edges. Actually, that's why I'm calling. Felix wants to have dinner tomorrow night. Like a thank you thing for helping with the move. Maybe that Italian place you like in Davidson. The invitation landed wrong. Felix didn't do gratitude. Didn't perform appreciation unless there was something tactical in it. What's the occasion? Just family dinner, Dad. Does there need to be an occasion? Yes, I thought. There's always an occasion when someone who treated you like an inconvenience suddenly wants to buy you dinner in a nice restaurant. Sure. What time? 7. I'll text you the address. She hung up before I could ask if this was her idea or Felix's. I already knew the answer. Saturday evening I arrived at the restaurant at 6:57. Tuscan place with exposed brick and Edison bulbs and the kind of menu where every entree comes with a paragraph explaining the farm it came from. Sarah and Felix were already seated at a corner table, wine glasses half empty, the body language of two people who'd been having an intense conversation that stopped the moment they saw me approaching. Felix stood to shake my hand. Firm grip. Eye contact. The performance of masculine respect between men who understand business. Daryl, thanks for coming. I know your Saturdays are probably busy. Not too busy for dinner with my daughter. I sat across from them, the chair wobbling slightly on uneven floor tiles. Sarah looked tired. The kind of tired that lives behind the eyes and doesn't wash off with makeup. Felix looked relaxed. Confident. The particular ease of someone who thought they'd successfully navigated a crisis. The server brought menus. Recited specials. Felix ordered for the table without asking what anyone else wanted, appetizers, wine, entrees, the kind of presumptive control that people mistake for leadership when it's really just dominance. So Daryl, Felix said after the server left, his voice carrying that false casualness of someone setting up a prepared speech, Sarah and I wanted to thank you properly for handling our move. We know it was last minute, and you really came through. It's what I do. Right, but it's more than that. Family helping family. That means something. He reached across the table and took Sarah's hand. The gesture looked rehearsed. We've been talking about how important it is to keep family close. To not let misunderstandings or different lifestyles create distance. I sipped water from a glass that had lipstick smudges on the rim from whoever used it before me. Waited. And we realized we haven't always been as inclusive as we should be. With you. With the family stuff. Sarah's been feeling bad about that. Sarah's face did something complicated. Like she wanted to object but couldn't find the words or the energy. Felix kept talking, his voice warming up like an engine hitting optimal RPM. So we want to make it right. We're planning a dinner party next month. Real nice event. Some of my colleagues, Sarah's friends, good food, good wine. And we want you there. We want to show everyone that Sarah's dad is someone we're proud to have in our lives. The words came out smooth and practiced, but underneath was the unmistakable architecture of condescension. He was framing my presence at his party as charity. As them graciously allowing the blue-collar father-in-law into spaces where he didn't naturally belong. As me being grateful for inclusion. I looked at Sarah. She was studying her wine glass like it might contain instructions for how to escape this conversation. That's generous, I said. What brought this on? Felix leaned back in his chair, the leather creaking under his weight. Honestly. I think we all got a little stressed during the move. Things were said. Feelings got hurt. But that's behind us now. Fresh start, right? He raised his wine glass. To family. And to putting all the confusion behind us. The confusion. That's what he was calling it. His theft. His scheme. His systematic liquidation of Sarah's inheritance. All reduced to confusion that we were now moving past because he'd returned the money. Sarah lifted her glass. Her hand trembled slightly. I left mine on the table. What confusion are we talking about? Felix's smile stayed fixed but his eyes changed. Calculation replacing warmth. Just the stress of the move. Miscommunication about storage. You know how these things get complicated. I don't know. Explain it to me. Dad. Sarah's voice was quiet. Warning. Can we just have a nice dinner? I'm trying to understand what we're celebrating. Felix says there was confusion. I'd like to know what that means. Felix set his wine glass down with more force than necessary. It means the moving process was messy. Things got disorganized. But it all worked out. Everything's fine now. Everything except the 12 items you removed from storage at 2:37 a.m. and sold for cash in a Walmart parking lot. The silence that followed was profound. The restaurant noise continued around us, conversations, silverware, the espresso machine hissing, but our table had gone vacuum quiet. Sarah looked between us, her face cycling through confusion toward something that might have been understanding. What is he talking about? Felix's jaw tightened. Your dad's got some kind of conspiracy theory about the move. I don't know where this is coming from. I'm talking about Thursday night, September 26th, when you accessed the storage unit using code 4729 at 2:37 a.m. and removed Herman Miller chairs, a Bose sound system, and a framed Robert Motherwell print worth $12,000. Then you drove to Route 77, met a buyer at 4:12 a.m., and accepted cash payment. Sarah had gone pale. Felix. He's making this up. Sarah, your dad's been weird about this whole move from the beginning. I think he's having some kind of breakdown. I pulled out my phone. Opened the photo gallery. Turned the screen toward Sarah. These are timestamped security camera screenshots showing Felix loading a budget rental van. This is GPS tracking data showing the van's route. This is footage of the cash transaction. Sarah took my phone with hands that shook. Scrolled through images. Her breathing changed. Faster. Shallower. Felix reached for the phone. Sarah, don't listen to this. Your dad installed illegal surveillance. He's been stalking us. The surveillance is legal. I installed and maintain the security system at Storage Max under contract with the facility owner. All recording is disclosed in the rental agreement Felix signed. I looked at Sarah. The cashier's check Felix gave me Wednesday was him returning the money from selling your possessions. $43,000. It's in your account now. You can verify the deposit. Sarah was still scrolling through the photos on my phone. Her face had gone beyond pale into something gray and slack. When she looked up at Felix, her expression held the particular devastation of someone watching their life's architecture collapse in real time. You stole from me. Her voice barely made it across the table. You sold my father's painting. My furniture. You stole from me and you were going to let me think it was lost in the move. Felix's mask finally cracked. The smooth confidence replaced by something desperate and mean. I was getting us out of debt. Your fucking family heirlooms weren't doing us any good sitting in storage. We needed cash. Real money. Not sentimental garbage. So you stole it. I liquidated assets. There's a difference. Not to the law. I kept my voice level. Factual. You committed conversion of secured property. That's a felony. The only reason you're not in jail right now is because Sarah hasn't filed charges yet. Felix turned on me then, the pretense of respect evaporating completely. You self-righteous asshole. You've been waiting for this, haven't you? Waiting to prove I'm not good enough for your daughter. Waiting to play hero and rescue her from the terrible mistake she made marrying someone who doesn't work with his fucking hands. I've been waiting for you to show Sarah who you actually are. That's different. And who am I? A thief who's stupid enough to rob the one person with complete visibility into your operation. Sarah stood up. Her chair scraped against the floor loud enough that nearby tables turned to look. I need air. She walked toward the restaurant exit, still holding my phone. Felix started to follow, but I put my hand on his arm. Not hard. Just enough pressure to make him stop. Let her go. Fuck you. That's my wife. That's my daughter. And right now she needs distance from both of us. Felix jerked his arm away. Stood there breathing hard, his face flushed with rage or humiliation or some combination that made his features look swollen and unfamiliar. You just destroyed my marriage. You destroyed your marriage the moment you decided Sarah's inheritance was your emergency fund. He left. Threw 2 20s on the table and walked out without looking back. I sat alone at the corner table while the server brought appetizers no one was going to eat. I paid the bill. Left a tip that was probably too large, but the server looked young and tired and didn't deserve to suffer because of family drama playing out in her section. Outside, Sarah was sitting on a bench near the parking lot, still scrolling through my phone. I sat next to her. Didn't speak. Let her process. How long have you known? Her voice was flat. Empty. Since Thursday morning when I took the job. Confirmed it Friday morning when he accessed the unit after hours. Why didn't you tell me immediately? Because you wouldn't have believed me. You needed to see the evidence. You needed to hear him lie to your face. She handed back my phone. Stared at the parking lot where Felix's BMW had been and was now just an empty space. I defended him. To my friends. To you. I made excuses for how he treated you and I told myself it was just personality differences. I know. I let him exclude you from our wedding party. I told you it was about numbers and venue capacity, but it was really because he said you'd embarrass us in front of his colleagues. The words came out like something she'd been holding behind her teeth for years. I chose him over you and he was robbing me the whole time. Sarah, don't. Don't tell me it's okay or that you understand. I need to sit with how stupid I've been. We sat in silence while the sun finished setting and the parking lot lights flickered on with that buzzing hum of sodium vapor struggling to life. Finally Sarah spoke again. What happens now? That depends on what you want to happen. I want my life back. The one before I met him. That's not available. But you can build something new. Something better. She looked at me then, her eyes wet but her jaw set with the particular determination that looked exactly like her mother's face before Ruth made hard decisions. I'm filing for divorce. And I want to press charges. All of them. Every single thing he did. I nodded. Pulled out a thumb drive I'd been carrying in my jacket pocket since Wednesday. Everything's on here. Videos. GPS data. Transaction records. Timestamps. Chain of custody documentation. Give it to your lawyer. She took the drive. Held it like it was something precious and terrible at the same time. Thank you for not letting him get away with it. Thank you for being willing to look at evidence you didn't want to see. We sat there until the restaurant started closing, the servers stacking chairs and sweeping floors visible through the windows. Then I drove Sarah to my house where her possessions were waiting in Unit 14 at Morrison's facility, safe and documented and ready to return to her whenever she was ready to rebuild. Felix showed up at my workshop Monday morning at 6:43, 3 days after the restaurant, driving a rental sedan because Sarah had taken the BMW when she moved out. He didn't knock. Just pushed through the door like he still had the right to enter spaces without permission, his face carrying that particular combination of sleeplessness and rage that makes men do things they'll regret in courtrooms later. I was calibrating a replacement GPS unit for one of my trucks, the diagnostic cables spread across my workbench like surgical instruments. Didn't look up when he entered. Didn't acknowledge his presence. Made him stand there in my space, breathing hard, working up to whatever speech he'd rehearsed in his car. We need to talk. His voice had lost the smooth edges. Sounded raw. Scraped. About what? About you destroying my life over a fucking misunderstanding. I set down the GPS unit. Looked at him for the first time. His eyes were bloodshot, red-rimmed like he'd been crying or drinking or both. His shirt had a stain near the collar. The kind of detail that meant he'd stopped caring about the performance of success. What misunderstanding? The storage thing. I was going to return everything. I just needed short-term liquidity for a business opportunity. Sarah's overreacting because you twisted the whole situation to make me look like a criminal. You are a criminal. You committed felony theft. The only reason you returned the money is because I caught you. Felix's hands clenched into fists at his sides. The knuckles went white. You had no right to surveil me. No right to interfere in my marriage. No right to turn my wife against me. Your wife is my daughter. And I had every right to document your theft of her property using security systems I legally installed and maintain. Legally. He spat the word like it tasted bad. You set me up. You knew I'd access that unit. You wanted me to steal so you could play hero and ruin my marriage. I gave you every opportunity to be honest. You chose theft. Felix took 3 steps closer, his body language shifting into something aggressive, confrontational. The particular posture of a man who decided intimidation was his last available tool. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to tell Sarah this was all a mistake. A technical error with your cameras. Bad timestamps. Whatever. You're going to say you were wrong and I'm innocent. I'm not going to do that. Yes, you are. Because if you don't, I'm filing harassment charges. Stalking. Illegal surveillance. I'll sue you for emotional distress. I'll make sure every client you have knows you use your security systems to spy on people. I'll destroy your business the way you destroyed my marriage. I leaned back against my workbench, felt the edge of the wood press into my lower back. You're welcome to try. But before you do, let me show you something. I opened my laptop. Pulled up a folder labeled Felix Walsh Evidence Package. This is what Sarah's lawyer received Friday morning. Video footage of your theft. GPS tracking data. Transaction records. Time-stamped photographs. Your signed storage agreement with the clause you violated highlighted in yellow. A complete chain of custody documentation showing every item you stole, when you took it, who you sold it to, and how much you received. Felix's face went pale. Sarah wouldn't give that to a lawyer. She filed for divorce Friday afternoon. Cited your theft as grounds. She also filed a police report Saturday morning. Detective named Martinez from the Property Crimes Division. He called me Sunday to verify the evidence. Said it's the most well-documented theft case he's seen in 11 years on the job. You're lying. Call the precinct. Ask for Martinez. Reference case number DV2025-4471. I turned the laptop screen toward him. But that's not the interesting part. The interesting part is what else I found while I was documenting your theft. I clicked through to another folder. Bank records. Credit card statements. Transaction histories. All public records, nothing illegal, just the kind of financial trail people leave when they think no one's paying attention. You've been in debt for 18 months. Credit cards maxed at $73,000 total. Personal loan from a peer-to-peer lender for $22,000 at 19% interest. You're 3 months behind on your BMW payment. 2 months behind on rent. Your medical software sales commissions dropped 40% last quarter because you lost your 2 biggest hospital accounts. Felix's breathing had gone shallow. Fast. How did you can't access my financial records. I didn't have to. Your credit report is part of the divorce discovery process. Sarah's lawyer subpoenaed it Friday. He shared it with me Saturday because I'm listed as a potential witness. I clicked to another screen. But here's the part you really need to see. Your employer's ethics policy. Section 12, subsection C. Quote, any employee charged with theft, fraud, or conversion of property valued over $5,000 will be immediately terminated pending investigation. End quote. Felix was shaking now. Subtle tremors running through his shoulders and hands. You sent this to my employer. I didn't have to. The police report is public record. Your HR department runs monthly background checks on all employees with federal contract access. They'll find it themselves by Wednesday. Thursday at the latest. You can't do this. His voice had gone high. Desperate. I already did. The only question now is how much worse you want to make it. I'll fight this. I'll fight all of it. I'll prove you fabricated evidence. With what money? You're broke. Sarah froze your joint accounts. Your credit cards are maxed. You can't afford a lawyer who could challenge even basic evidence, much less the level of documentation I've provided. I stood up. Walked closer to him. Close enough to see the sweat beading on his forehead, smell the sour anxiety coming off his skin. Here's what's actually going to happen. You're going to sign Sarah's divorce papers without contesting anything. You're going to accept the plea deal the prosecutor offers for the theft charge, probably probation and restitution if you're lucky. You're going to find a new job in a different industry because medical software sales requires clean background checks. And you're going to stay away from my daughter for the rest of your life. Or what? Or I release the rest of the evidence I haven't shared yet. What evidence? You just said you gave everything to the lawyer. I gave him everything about the storage theft. I didn't give him the photographs of you meeting with the buyer 3 other times over the past 6 months. I didn't give him the documentation showing this wasn't your first theft. I didn't give him the evidence that you've been systematically selling Sarah's possessions since March. Felix's face went from pale to gray. That's not true. March 14th you sold a set of silver candlesticks from Sarah's grandmother's estate. Got $800 from a pawn shop on South Boulevard. April 22nd you sold a vintage watch. $1,100. May 7th you sold 3 pieces of jewelry from Sarah's mother's collection. $2,600. Should I continue? His legs seemed to give out. He sat down hard on my workshop floor, his back against the wall, head in his hands. I needed the money. The debt was crushing me. I couldn't tell Sarah because she'd leave me. She left you anyway. Because you're a thief. I love her. The words came out broken. Pathetic. You love what she represented. Stability. Assets. A safety net for your failing finances. That's not love. That's parasitism. Felix looked up at me with eyes that held nothing but defeat. What do you want from me? Nothing. I want you gone from Sarah's life. That's already happening. This conversation is just making sure you understand that fighting it will only make your situation worse. I have nothing left. No wife. No job. No money. You took everything. I crouched down so we were at eye level. I didn't take anything from you. I documented what you took from my daughter and made sure there were consequences. There's a difference. I'll be homeless. Bankrupt. I have nowhere to go. You should have thought about that before you decided stealing was easier than being honest. I stood back up. Walked to the workshop door. Opened it. You need to leave now. If you come back here, if you contact Sarah, if you do anything except sign the divorce papers and take your plea deal, I'll release the additional evidence and make sure the prosecutor knows you've been running a long-term theft operation. That changes the charge from simple theft to organized fraud. That's a Class F felony. 4 to 8 years mandatory minimum. Felix pulled himself up using the wall. Stood there swaying slightly like a building in wind. You're a cruel man. I'm a careful man. There's a difference. He walked to the door. Stopped in the frame. Turned back one last time. Sarah won't thank you for this. She'll resent you for destroying her marriage. She'll resent me for telling her the truth. She'll resent you for not letting her figure it out herself. For treating her like she needed protection instead of trusting her to handle her own life. Maybe. But she'll figure that out alive and solvent instead of bankrupted and gaslit. I can live with her resentment. Felix left. Got in his rental sedan and drove away with the particular defeated slump of someone who'd just realized they'd lost a game they didn't know they were playing until it was over. I went back to my workbench. Finished calibrating the GPS unit. Installed it in the truck. Tested the signal strength. Documented the installation in my maintenance logs. By 10:30 I was back to routine operations, dispatching trucks and monitoring routes and solving the 1,000 small problems that keep a logistics company running. My phone rang at 11:15. Sarah. Felix just called me. He said you threatened him. I explained his options. He's talking about pressing charges against you. Saying you fabricated evidence. He can try. Everything I documented is admissible and verified. His lawyer will tell him that if he can afford to consult one. Silence on her end. The sound of traffic in the background. She was driving somewhere. Dad, did you find evidence of other thefts? Before the storage unit. Yes. How long? Since March. 5 separate incidents I can document. Probably more I can't. Her breathing changed. I could hear her crying, trying to keep it quiet, failing. I married a stranger. I lived with him for 3 years and I didn't know who he was. You knew who he pretended to be. That's different. I should have seen it. The signs were there. The debt. The secrecy about money. The way he'd get angry when I asked about finances. I ignored all of it because I wanted the marriage to work. Wanting something to work doesn't make you stupid. It makes you human. I feel stupid. You'll feel smarter next time. Experience is expensive but permanent. She was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice had steadied. Felix says he's going to take the plea deal. He doesn't have money for a lawyer. He's moving back to his parents' place in Ohio. Good. Is it? Good? He's destroyed. Homeless. Unemployed. Facing criminal charges. Part of me feels like maybe you went too far. He stole from you 5 times over 6 months. He sold your mother's jewelry. He was planning to empty your storage unit and blame it on moving company error. How much further should I have let him go? I don't know. I just feel like there should have been another way. There was. He could have been honest. He could have asked for help. He could have treated you like a partner instead of an asset to liquidate. He chose theft. I chose documentation. Only one of those is illegal. Another silence. Then, thank you for protecting me. Even if I'm mad about how you did it. You're allowed to be mad. Just be mad somewhere safe. She hung up. I stood in my workshop surrounded by tools and equipment and the particular smell of diesel and metal that had been my professional life for 23 years. Outside, trucks moved. Cargo shifted. The logistics of daily existence continued exactly as designed. Felix was gone. Sarah was safe. The evidence was documented. The consequences had been delivered. The system had functioned exactly as it was supposed to when someone tried to exploit kindness for profit. I made coffee in the dented percolator and watched it brew, the familiar gurgling sound filling the workshop like breathing. Some problems you can't prevent. You can only make sure the right people pay the cost when things break. Felix had broken trust. Now he was paying for it. The math was simple. The execution had been clean. And somewhere in Ohio he was learning what happens when you mistake patience for permission and silence for consent. The divorce finalized in November, 8 weeks after Sarah filed. Felix didn't contest anything. Signed every document his court-appointed attorney put in front of him with the mechanical compliance of someone who'd stopped fighting because fighting required resources he no longer possessed. The criminal case resolved a week later. Plea deal exactly as I'd predicted, 2 years probation, $43,000 in restitution already paid, community service, mandatory theft counseling. Class H felony reduced to misdemeanor conversion on condition he complete all terms without violation. His criminal record would show the conviction permanently. Background checks would flag it. Employment in any industry requiring financial trust or security clearance would be impossible. He'd effectively been exiled from the professional class he'd worked his entire adult life to join. Sarah heard through mutual friends that Felix moved to Columbus, took a job doing customer service for an insurance call center, lived in his parents' basement at 34 years old. The medical software company had terminated him exactly as their policy required, no severance, no references, just a notation in his personnel file that he'd been separated due to criminal charges. His LinkedIn profile disappeared. His social media went dark. He'd effectively erased himself from the digital landscape where he'd once performed success for an audience of colleagues and clients who'd already forgotten his name. Sarah moved into a townhouse in Davidson in December, a 2-bedroom place with hardwood floors and enough closet space for the possessions I'd kept safe in Unit 14. We spent a Saturday moving her in, just the 2 of us and a truck, the way we used to move her between college apartments before Felix entered her life and convinced her that hiring professional movers was what successful people did. She was quieter now. More careful. The particular wariness of someone who'd learned that trust is a currency that should be spent slowly and verified constantly. She asked more questions. Challenged assumptions. Stopped apologizing for having standards or boundaries or expectations that other people found inconvenient. She looked more like Ruth every day. Not physically, though she had her mother's eyes and the same way of tilting her head when she was thinking through a problem. But in the fundamental architecture of her personality. The refusal to accept manipulation as normal. The willingness to walk away from situations that required her to diminish herself. The understanding that being alone was better than being with someone who treated love like a transaction. We had dinner once a week. Sometimes at her place, sometimes at mine, sometimes at restaurants where neither of us had memories attached to the furniture. We didn't talk about Felix much. Didn't need to. He was a closed chapter. A problem that had been identified, isolated, and removed from the system. Sarah started dating again in February. Moved slowly. Kept her finances separate. Introduced me to the men she was seeing early in the process, watching how they treated me as a diagnostic test for how they'd treat her once the performance phase ended. Smart. Careful. The kind of behavior that comes from expensive education. I kept running James Moving and Storage. Same trucks. Same routes. Same careful documentation of every item that moved through my system. The business was stable. Profitable in the modest way that small operations stay profitable when overhead is controlled and quality is consistent. I didn't need to expand. Didn't need to chase growth for growth's sake. Just needed to maintain the systems that worked and solve problems as they emerged. Morrison Secure Storage stayed busy. Unit 14, where I'd stored Sarah's possessions, stayed empty for a while, then got rented to a widow who needed somewhere to put her late husband's tools while she figured out what to keep and what to sell. Life continued. Cargo moved. Problems got solved. The logistics of daily existence flowed through channels I'd spent 2 decades building and maintaining. Some nights I sat in my workshop after the day's work was done, the overhead lights casting everything in that flat LED clarity, and thought about the question Felix had asked me. Whether Sarah would resent me for not letting her figure it out herself. Whether I'd treated her like she needed protection instead of trusting her to handle her own life. Maybe he was right. Maybe Sarah would have eventually noticed the missing jewelry, the depleted accounts, the pattern of lies that Felix couldn't maintain forever. Maybe she would have left him on her own timeline, drawn her own conclusions, owned her own discovery. But maybe not. Maybe she would have stayed. Made excuses. Convinced herself that marriage meant accepting imperfection. Let Felix drain her slowly until she woke up at 45 with nothing left except debt and resentment and the particular exhaustion that comes from spending decades married to someone who views you as a resource to extract rather than a person to cherish. I'd made a choice. To document rather than ignore. To intervene rather than wait. To use the skills and access I possessed to protect someone I loved from someone who was hurting her. Maybe that was overreach. Maybe that was control disguised as care. Or maybe that was just being a father to a daughter who'd temporarily forgotten that people who love you don't steal from you in the middle of the night. The workshop was quiet except for the hum of electronics and the distant sound of traffic on the highway. My coffee had gone cold in the mug Sarah gave me 9 years ago, back when she still thought her old man's job was something worth commemorating with a Father's Day gift. The mug had a chip in the rim now. A crack running down one side that I'd superglued back together. It leaked slightly if you filled it too full. But it still worked. Still held coffee. Still served its function despite being damaged. Ruth used to say that the measure of a person wasn't what they did when everything was easy. It was what they did when the choice was between comfortable lies and uncomfortable truth. When doing the right thing meant accepting that people would be angry with you. When protecting someone meant they might resent you for not letting them protect themselves. She'd said that 2 weeks before she died, talking about a situation at her work where she'd reported a colleague for stealing patient medications. The colleague had been fired. Other nurses had been angry with Ruth for not handling it privately. For not giving the woman a chance to get help quietly. For choosing policy over compassion. Ruth had stood by her decision. Said that compassion toward one person at the expense of vulnerable patients wasn't compassion. It was just choosing which victims you were willing to ignore. I'd thought about that conversation a lot during the weeks I spent documenting Felix's theft. Thought about it when I made the choice to not warn him, to not give him a chance to stop, to not handle it privately. Thought about it when Sarah asked if there had been another way. There probably was another way. A softer way. A way that preserved Felix's dignity and gave him opportunity to save face. But that way would have required Sarah to keep trusting someone who'd proven he would steal from her the moment he thought he could get away with it. And I couldn't accept that cost. Not for Felix's comfort. Not for anyone's. The moving business taught me one permanent truth that Felix learned too late and Sarah learned just in time. Everything in life is logistics. You're either controlling the movement of assets or your cargo being moved by someone else's plan. You're either documenting the transactions or you're discovering too late that everything you thought you owned was already being sold in parking lots by people who bet you wouldn't notice until it was too late. Felix had bet wrong. Had assumed that. The broke divorced dad was too old or too stupid or too desperate for family connection to recognize a systematic theft operation. Had mistaken my patience for weakness. My silence for consent. My professional courtesy for ignorance. He'd confused the fact that I worked with my hands with the assumption that I didn't work with my head. The sunlight coming through the workshop windows had that particular quality of late afternoon in spring. Sharp. Clear. The kind of light that makes everything look exactly like what it is without romance or shadow. My phone buzzed. Text from Sarah. Dinner tomorrow? My place. I'm making Mom's lasagna recipe. I texted back confirmation. Put the phone down. Finished the cold coffee despite the leak. Outside my workshop trucks were returning from routes. Drivers doing end-of-day inspections. The normal sounds of a business that functioned because someone maintained the systems and solved the problems and documented the movement of everything that mattered. Felix was in Ohio learning that theft has consequences that compound like interest. Sarah was in Davidson learning that being alone is better than being with someone who treats you like inventory. And I was in my workshop, surrounded by tools that did exactly what they were designed to do when you understood their function and maintained them properly. The world made sense when you paid attention to what people did instead of what they said. When you documented behavior instead of accepting excuses. When you understood that protecting someone you love isn't control. It's just refusing to be a passive witness to their destruction. I had let Felix think I was weak because weak men are easy to manipulate and I needed him confident enough to commit to his plan. I had let him exclude me from family events because excluded people don't get access to information that might expose patterns. I had played the role of the obsolete blue-collar father-in-law because that role gave me permission to be underestimated. And underestimated people see everything. I rinsed the coffee mug. Put it in the drying rack. Started the closing checklist for the day. Locked the secure files. Powered down the computers. Set the alarm system. The routine was familiar. Comforting. The particular satisfaction of knowing that everything was in its place. Everything was documented. Everything was ready for tomorrow's problems. Some people mistake kindness for weakness. Mistake patience for ignorance. Mistake silence for consent. Those people eventually learn the difference. Usually when it's too late to do anything except sign divorce papers and accept plea deals and move back to their parents' basement wondering how they miscalculated so completely. I locked the workshop door behind me and drove home through traffic that moved in predictable patterns along routes I'd traveled 10,000 times. The familiarity was satisfying. The world made sense when you understood how things moved and why. When you tracked the cargo. When you documented the theft. When you made sure the right people paid the cost when systems failed. Felix had failed. Sarah had survived. And I'd done what fathers do when their daughters marry predators who think family means access instead of obligation. I documented everything. Waited for the right moment. And then presented the evidence that transformed confidence into consequences. The rest was just logistics.